Welcome to Beyond Survival, a podcast for school leaders and teacher leaders that provides tools and tips for navigating change. I'm Anna Surratt, Coordinator of Professional Learning in the Office of Professional Growth and Innovation.
And I'm Shelley Labiosa, Professional Learning Specialist here at PGI.
In episode 1, we introduced the concept or metaphor of permanent whitewater, and we also introduced the idea of cognitive reappraisal as a strategy to help us normalize the chaos in which we found ourselves. Today we will extend the metaphor of permanent whitewater with a discussion around reading the waters, a valuable and very necessary prevention skill for navigating whitewater safely.
So let me tell you about my first rafting trip. The anticipation of hitting that first set of rapids was really exciting until we got to them. And then my stomach was churning as I was looking at those rough waters, wondering how we would ever survive. At that point, our guide had us paddle into calmer waters near the shoreline, and he paused to explain what we were looking at and how we could read the waters. And that if we paid attention to the way the water was moving, that we would then know what moves to make to carry us through the rapids safely. So we made it through that set of rapids, and we celebrated like crazy. And then each time we came to another set of rapids, we repeated the process. We paused, we took a look at the water, we made some decisions. The movement of the water makes reliable patterns, and we simply had to train our eyes to see and understand those patterns.
So let's talk a little bit about the patterns that you just mentioned, Shelley. There's 4 features of whitewater that can create various patterns in the water. Knowing those features and the patterns they create can help us navigate the water safely. The first we want to look at is they're probably the most obvious of the features, that being rocks. Now, when we think about rocks, there's 2 different types of rocks that we're dealing with. One would be those that are visible and above the surface of the water, and the second would be those that are below the water. Now, the strategy in approaching both types of rocks is going to be the same. That strategy is to keep your eyes ahead. What is your vision? What is your focus? Where are you headed? Not keeping your focus on those rocks. Now, the tactics then would be different for how we approach them and get around them. The ones that are above the water, it seems intuitive that once we get to that rock and we see it coming, that looming sense of danger tells us to lean away from it. Now, the physics of the boat, though, and the rock and water tell us that it makes sense to lean into the rock and let the current take us around it. So as a leader, it's very similar to using the discomfort, leaning into the discomfort to help you move around that visible obstacle. Now, for the waters that lie, or the rocks that lie beneath the waters, those are the ones that, honestly, we can usually easily paddle right over. So spending our time in that looming sense of wonder or worry about what lies beneath the water is really a waste of time when we can just paddle straight forward. As leaders, we need to carefully look at the way the water is flowing. The best strategy is to know your vision, so that way the rocks don't become your focus. Think, what rocks are really distracting your attention from the overall vision? And then where is it that you need to lean into discomfort and let the current carry you? And then where do you just need to paddle forward?
Another common feature in whitewater is an eddy. Now, an eddy occurs when water is rushing around an obstacle and it causes the river to flow upstream and downstream, or the current to go both directions at the same time, and it creates a whirlpool. In a slow-moving river, these whirlpools are actually a good thing because they offer some calm water where you can stop and rest, you can take a break, get out of the river, get out of the boat, and it's really important to recognize this feature for that reason. Riding the currents can be really exhilarating, but it can also be very exhausting and dangerous if you don't pause to rest and recharge. So if you continue pushing through the rapids without taking a break, your muscles might cramp, that adrenaline rush can really cause a crash and leave you feeling really burnt out. You can lose momentum. But as we constantly fight through the rapids, we don't have time to really create that space we need to take a breath and think about what we're going to do next. So as leaders, what is a strategy for making the most of your eddies? Well, first of all, you have to find them. You have to look for your opportunities or even create your own opportunities for an eddy. A time to take care of yourself through either physical activity, by stretching and breathing, by exercising, doing something physical to sort of, get you out of that cramped mode of, holding that paddle so tightly and focusing on the river. You also can connect with your team, those friends and family members who have your back. When you get out of the boat on the river in an eddy, you laugh, you crack jokes, you talk about the beautiful surroundings, and you just take a moment to connect with those people that you were riding the rapids with. And the final thing that you can do is to really just be still, to rest, recalibrate, refocus. I know that's really hard for us to do as leaders, but it's absolutely critical. As a reflection, think about where your eddies are. Where are those times and places throughout your day that you can pull over to recharge with physical activity, safe relationships, and even rest? Now, a third feature is directly connected with eddies, and that's called an eddy line. Now, the eddy line is where the current flowing downstream meets the current flowing upstream and creates a very unstable current, which makes getting into and out of an eddy tricky because the water is flowing faster there. You have to pay close attention to how the water's moving to help you properly identify those eddy lines, because crossing them without flipping is tricky and requires some skill. It actually requires a strategy of being direct and moving very quickly. So as leaders, when you come upon opposing currents, it's most effective to act quickly and be very direct. To reflect upon this, think about what you're facing currently that might require a more direct approach and very clear communication and action.
The fourth and final feature that we'll unpack is the downstream V, which is created by two obstacles through which the water flows. So if you think about two obstacles, the water going through it is creating this nice V. It's an opportunity for rafters to experience a nice and smooth downward path along the river. These are often seen better from above than from within the river. So when we're thinking about strategy here, it might take more time and effort, but identifying the best path sometimes requires that we get out of the boat and view the river from a different and maybe broader perspective, because you often see more by standing still on the shore than you would from paddling back in the boat. So finding that smooth shot between obstacles can really save you a lot of time and energy. As leaders, what aspects of your work really require you to have that high-level overview of the currents that are forming between your staff, your students, and your families? If we're trying to synthesize our thinking here in this metaphor with permanent whitewater, it really boils down to this. As leaders, we need to know what the patterns are telling us so that we know how to respond. Is this a time and a situation in which it's best to stay in the raft and paddle forward? Is this a time in which we need to pause, rest, and recharge? Or is this a situation that really requires us to have a broader view, to get out of the raft and look down from above?
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for episode 4, when we'll discuss a framework for navigating the knowns and unknowns of leading in permanent whitewater.